What's up, everybody, and welcome to the SGN Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Diego, and I'm here to actually introduce my very first guest on the show, and it's with great pleasure I can introduce my father, Eddie Call.
What's up, everybody?
I guess you can go ahead and give like a backstory, a little bit about your history in racing, and how you have actually more expertise than I have in any of the sports I talk about, so I guess that kind of makes this a little bit more of a more professional podcast than I've ever done.
Yeah, well, okay, I don't know. I've done some stuff, yeah. Well, let's see. I raced at club level in the United States for about 5 years. Had a good time, raced with a lot of really great people. I was actually racing when Nicky Hayden and his brother Roger Lee were coming through WERA, which is the club that I raced with, who are now the feeder series for AMA, which is now called Moto America. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I gained a lot of experience, but not a lot of trophies. But it wasn't so much about that. It was more about doing something that I thought would be fun and kind of daring it, and I was able to do it. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, and some of the better memories I have of us living in the States and was traveling around, going to your races in Talladega or Roebling Road.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the better times, some of the people you were around, it was a really good time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then, of course, your uncle Ricky won lots and lots of championships. Yeah, he was definitely a great racer. I'm talking like he's dead or something, but he was really good. So we had a lot of fun, and definitely we learned a lot, and it helped me over the last years watching Motogp, World Superbike, not so much the American series, but yeah, so I can understand a lot of the stuff that they're doing. Not like somebody who's like a Colin Edwards or somebody like that, obviously, but when it comes to how people ride, what it takes, things like that, and a lot of the technical aspects, I definitely have a good understanding and kind of a practical background.
Yeah, and of course you also have a background in being a mechanic and working on, of course, all your bikes and all that stuff, so you have a lot more knowledge than your average person, not just when it comes to the racing itself, but also when it comes to tuning up your bike and setting everything up and for race day and stuff like that. So it definitely helps.
Yeah, the engineering standpoint, I definitely know a bit more than just your average squid. So yeah, I'm proud of that. I like the fact that I can watch something and kind of base what I see, what I feel I'm seeing on actual reality and seat of the pants experience.
Yeah, and that's always kind of one of like the most some of the more interesting parts of whenever we do talk, not just joking around but actually talking realistically about MotoGP or Superbike, is that your opinion is always a lot more different than I guess your average Joe, because you actually know what you're looking at, what the rider's probably kind of going through. Of course, not at the pro level necessarily, not what you did, but you know more or less what you're looking at a lot more than somebody like me or most people you're going to see on the streets. So like you always, I don't know, it seems like your predictions come true a lot more often than most people's do. Of course, MotoGP, It's kind of easy to predict that Marquez is going to win, but when it comes to the people that are going to surprise you at this race, or they're going to have a good season, or in World Superbike, I guess at times too, like you always seem to have more better intel, I guess, a better, how can I put it, more well educated opinion on what's going on.
Yes, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's really easy to sit there and look at stuff and say, okay, I predict this, I predict that. If you don't really know, if you don't really understand what it takes, it doesn't matter whether it's motorcycle racing or UFC or whatever. It's not so easy. There's a lot that goes into this stuff, and you have to understand more than just, okay, this guy's bigger, this guy's faster, or this guy's motorcycle is quicker, or this guy's won all these titles. It's a lot more intricate, and that's what makes athletes so amazing, is that you can take two people, put them on the same bike, or put them in the same gym and they train, but somebody is always going to be that much better. And I think there's a lot of stuff you have to take into mind on technique, factories in this case, motorcycle racing. If you have the right factory, then you have a better chance of winning. And more than anything, if you have the right people running your program. And nowadays, it's a lot of it's on electronics. If you have the right, data guy, then you can itch that last little tenth that is going to be the difference between, a podium or 10th, or maybe even the difference between 10th and 16th. So there's a lot. It's a lot to consider, and I mean, I just enjoy watching the racing, especially now since it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, there was a while there where Motogp was looking like it might go down the route of Formula One, and basically every single week it's Lewis Hamilton, or back, when Motogp was looking like that, Sebastian Vettel, just winning every single race and getting pretty boring. Right. But luckily, Dovizioso and Ducati have kind of turned things around, and at the very least, at almost every weekend they're gonna give a good go at it. And then, of course, you have the Yamahas, who haven't been the best over the past couple of years, but when they're on their day, then they can compete with anybody. And it's a lot more interesting, for sure. And of course, now you have Rins on the Suzuki looking really good. You have some good talented guys coming through.
Yeah, I think a big plus for MotoGP, and personally, I thought when they did the CRTs, the customer racing teams, I thought that was a huge mistake. But I understood they needed to put people on the grid. The reality was nobody really cared what position they came in, because they were all battling for 30 seconds behind. I mean, it was horrible. But they managed to get everything built back up, and now you've got this season. I think you have a grid where only 3 of the riders in MotoGP haven't won a world title. Everybody else has won a world title at some level in MotoGP World Championship level. Mm-hmm. So you have so many guys that are able to walk into any team and really put in a good performance, and I think you're going to see that this year. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we can definitely give general predictions for the season coming on a little bit later.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I guess we can go ahead and talk a little bit about what we saw in Qatar. Now, as we mentioned, of course, we were talking about this off air. Tracks like Qatar and Termas de Rio Hondo in Argentina, these are all tracks that unfortunately are plagued by the issue of having a lot of dust on the track, so it's not easy for riders to really get a groove in the first few practice sessions or testing as well. So it's not always the best indicator of who's going to do well throughout the entire season, but I guess it's not really surprised to see that Dovizioso and Marquez are the 2 top dogs once again this season. So I guess kind of just give us a general idea of what you saw at Qatar.
Well, yeah. In Qatar, I think it was always going to be kind of the usual suspects. The Ducati is fast at Qatar. Of course, it started with Stoner with his crazy, just win it or bin it type of style. And Dovi has proven himself to be the man on a Ducati. I like Dovi. I think he's a great rider. He has a great personality. He's quiet. He does his job. He kind of reminds me of Nicky Hayden a lot in that sense. And I think that he is going to keep pushing it. The Ducati has all the speed, but they've had a lot of issues with corner speed. So they have to brake a lot more, and they're a lot slower going through, excuse me, the apex of the corner, whereas the Honda and the Yamaha, Suzuki, they can just wheel right through there, which is an issue for the Ducati. So they have a lot of grunt. So when they come out of the corner, they can really hit it, and it takes a lot to do that. So my opinion is, I think Marquez is going to continue to be right there, and he's going to win a lot of races. Qatar itself, I was really impressed with Crutchlow coming in third. He is a really good rider. I think he obviously lacks the ability to win a title unless something crazy happens. He's not on factory level. He is on a factory bike, but he's not really on a factory level bike. But he's good, and he's somebody that can disrupt the top five, let's say. The race itself was really exciting. I thought that there were a lot of great passes, and the fact that you had so many guys, in the first half of the race right there, was it the top 10 or something like that, was just stuck to each other. Dovey did a great job of controlling that, and in the end he pulled it out. That was a really good ride, but he has proven that he can outduel Marquez. I think 9 times out of 10 he can outduel Marquez if they're right there together at the end. But a lot of times Marquez, of course, pulls away. For a surprise for me was Quartararo. On that Petronas Yamaha, to be a rookie, and of course he stalled the bike for the warm-up lap, so he had to start from pit lane, which was really bad. But the guy was doing, what was it? It was over a second a lap faster than anybody else, and he still managed to finish 16th. And that was a huge feat. I mean, he was really fast. He was only 16 seconds off of first place. He was only 16 seconds back, and he had to start from pit lane. And pit lane, whoever's there, they cannot start the race until the last bike has cleared the first turn. So he was at a huge disadvantage. And I thought he's somebody that I think in the end of the season, he will be easily in the top 10. And I'd say look for him around 5th. And he could be the guy that makes Valentino Rossi look pretty bad this year, considering. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's South American, right?
No, he's French.
He's French.
Quartararo is French.
Who am I thinking of? It's like Colombian.
That's oh crap. Wait a minute. No, he's not in MotoGP anymore.
Oh, that's right. Maybe it was last year. Maybe it was last year. It was last year. Yeah.
Yeah, he went to. That was Hernandez.
Yep, you're Yanni Hernandez. That's right.
Yeah, Yanni Hernandez. But I think he went to World Superbike.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was confused with those two then. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, this is difficult. Very difficult.
No doubt about that.
But if he was a really good rider, and I think that a lot of it, he was on the Ducati most of the time, and that Ducati is just so hard to ride. Maybe if he'd have jumped on, maybe if he had the opportunity to be on an Aprilia, even though it has a long way to go before it's ready to be up towards the front. At least it seems like it's a good riding bike. It's got good corner speed and things like that. It's just lacking in engine and things like that.
Yeah.
But they'll get there.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the more interesting things about this season is that you look at the Suzuki and the improvements they've made, and of course they have a guy like Rins who has a lot of talent. He's looking like a guy who could potentially, be a future. I don't know about world champion. I mean, he has the potential for sure. It's just a matter of, if Suzuki can make the right improvements, and then of course, maybe the Honda has a bad year. He's looking like one of those guys. And then as you said, the Aprilia, they are improving, and they could potentially get up there. So I think that this might be a more competitive season of MotoGP, not just in terms of like who's going to win the title, because I think pretty much everybody expects Marquez to kind of run away with it in the end. But I think that in general, if you're looking at from like second on to maybe 7th or 8th, there might be a little bit more competition for those spots right there.
Well, I agree. And with the Suzuki, Mir in that race was really fast. And remember, Mir is a rookie, and he's obviously never ridden the Suzuki. The Suzuki this year, and even last year, I think it had a lot of potential. Rins did a lot last year. He was really fast. I think him and Mir together are really going to shove that bike forward and give Suzuki a lot of information. And Brivio, the team manager, he of course has tons of experience with Yamaha, so he knows what to do. And I think between those two, Suzuki should be really good this year. One of those guys should be able to easily finish in the top 10, maybe in the top 7. But it is a competitive year, I think. It's going to be really, really interesting. And the biggest thing is at Qatar, the first 11 riders were all they finished within 10 seconds of each other, which is pretty damn close considering. So yeah, it's going to be a great season. I think as you said, Qatar, Argentina, and even Circuit of Americas, I think they're not really gauges on how the season's going to be because, like you said, they suffer from dirty tracks. Circuit of Americas, as a beautiful a track it is, I don't think it's really at the level as, say, some of the more historic tracks in MotoGP. Qatar, of course, always has sand. Nothing you can do about that. They're in the desert. Then you have Argentina now, which Argentina, the first practice today was really slippery, but nobody has really been on the track since I think it's November. So you have issues that create problems for the teams, and these are tracks that give the smaller teams the opportunity to get some points. Whereas I think some of the bigger teams, the one that historically, finish really well, once you get, over to Europe and then the season really starts. I think a lot of those teams are very careful because they have to make sure they're okay for when they do arrive in Europe in I think it's a month and a half. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fair to say that tracks like Qatar, Circuit of the Americas, and Argentina, I think that that these 3 tracks, and also Austria. Austria is another track that kind of comes to mind. These are more point-and-shoot tracks, whereas, of course, the Europeans, Jerez comes to mind, Sachsenring especially. All these tracks are very, very technical, and it's all about, getting your engineering correct. It's all about, corner speed and all that type of stuff. So I think that's kind of where you'll see guys like Marquez and probably, the Yamahas as well do a lot better. Because I think that, what the most noticeable thing I saw in Qatar was the difference in top speed. Of course, we all know Ducati has always traditionally had that advantage, but like Honda this year are right on par with the Ducati more or less in top speed.
Yeah.
The Suzuki, apart from when Rins was drafting, and of course that helps quite a bit. Whenever he was a little bit farther out, his top speed was I think it was like around 10 kilometers per hour slower. So that's a pretty big disadvantage. And the Yamaha, of course, still has that issue. I think that the biggest issue that they were talking about the Yamaha is that when it comes to getting drive out of corners, they still have a big issue with that.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe once they can figure that out, and if the Suzuki can get a little bit better in terms of top speed, then they can also compete a bit more on tracks like, of course, Qatar, Circuit of the Americas, etc. But maybe when they get to these more tight, just technical tracks, then maybe these teams will show a little bit more of what they're actually capable of.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think Suzuki. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with their engine, because their engine was really good at Qatar. I think that their top speed on that straight, it's also affected by other riders, how they come out of a corner, things like that. And a lot of times if they come out, especially if they're trying to be on somebody, maybe they miss an apex a bit, or they change their line enough to try to get under to get a draft, and it just doesn't come off.
Mm-hmm.
The Suzuki is really fast. It's not like the Ducati or the Honda, because the Honda is really quick. But I think that the Suzuki is damn close, and they are definitely much better than the Yamaha. Like you were saying, the Yamaha still has an underperforming engine, I think. I don't know if maybe they have maybe a frame issue, because I know they have problems with their tires. So I don't know. I think that Suzuki will do well most everywhere, because Mir and Rins are motivated and they have a lot of talent. So I think they should be able to make up for that little bit here and there. Most everybody, the electronics has more or less, I think, been figured out. And then a lot of the bikes are ridden using kind of GPS points anyway. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah. I think that regardless, it's definitely going to be an interesting one, because like you said, Marquez, he's going to win a lot of the races, but Dovizioso has shown time and time again that when it comes to one-on-one duels, he's just got such a high riding IQ that he can kind of get himself in the right spot to beat him out. Like, I didn't say beat him off, but I said beat him out, and he managed to beat him quite a bit. I think it's like Marquez he has kind of this brash style to where when it comes to duels, if he gets ahead of you and he can keep it, then he's probably going to beat you. But a lot of times he might do something in the wrong spot and he might go a little bit wide. And it seems like having had, I don't know, they probably had, 10, maybe even more over the past couple of years of these just insane battles. It seems like kind of Dovizioso's kind of found the right way to beat him and where to get through him in certain spots. So I think that it's going to be an interesting one between those guys. But I think in the end, Marquez he's just too good, and the Honda is probably just too good too. I think that he will probably pull it out.
No, I agree with you. Dovi definitely, he knows how to race, and he knows how to strategize the end of his race. And more than likely, Dovi, before the race even starts, he probably runs a million different scenarios through his head, even before the race starts, knowing that if he ends up in a duel with Marquez, which a lot of times, like you said, he ends up that way, then he can kind of understand what he would like to do, because of course he knows his perfect line coming out of the last corner. So he's going to try to make sure that he has that, but more importantly, he needs to make sure Marquez hit his perfect exit. So yeah, I think Dovi. If Dovi, and of course we really haven't seen what Ducati has brought out and what they kind of made up for. It looks like they still have the corner speed issue, but if they fix that a bit more and they're able to make the tires last, which of course is why they have that spoiler, then he may be able to be there at the end. I mean, he was there at the end last season. So there's really no reason why he can't win it.
Yeah.
It's just that at this point, you'd have to be stupid to not bet on Marquez to win the title again, especially after one race.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
I mean, we need to see who is what after, say, Jerez. Once they've done that, then we can kind of see, okay, this is the reality. This is what the teams actually have when it comes to bike performance. The first three races are, I think, my opinion, that's just money races for MotoGP, for Dorna.
Yeah, going to the countries who probably give him the most. Like we said, Jerez and the European tracks. That's where you can really gauge who's where.
Right, right. Because historically, the riders, how they perform. You know what they like, what they don't like, how the bikes have historically performed. Whereas when you have tracks like Qatar or the Argentina track or the Circuit of Americas, whenever you have those, the tracks just aren't really. They're just not representative of what the actual season as a whole is. So you can't really. I don't think you can really gauge anything off the first three. I mean, it's entertaining to watch. It should be interesting. I personally think that Dovi might just win this weekend. I think that he definitely has the confidence. He just coming off the win in Qatar. I think that he could probably win it, but Marquez will be right on his butt the whole time if he doesn't crash.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's a very likely prediction because as we mentioned a few times already, Termos de Rio Hondo and Qatar, they have kind of similar issues in terms of traction and stuff like that, and they might favor a little bit the Ducati and the way it rides. And of course, you have to mention like Dovizioso, a lot of the issues that the Ducati traditionally has with his style, he's always kind of able to put it to the side and manage to get probably more out of the bike than arguably anybody except for Casey Stoner. Stoner, of course, had a very different style. His was a lot more, just balls to the wall, and Dovizioso was a lot more calculated, perfect technique, perfect through every single corner. But it's really really nice to see somebody like Dovizioso ride because, of course, me and you being huge Nicky Hayden fans,
right.
It's kind of nice to see somebody who's very similar to him, who's liked by just about everybody, who's very nice, and just his riding style is, it's just beautiful to watch, and in a completely different way than Marquez. When you watch Marquez, he's insane, much like Stoner. It's just everything he does, it's a highlight reel. It's basically, on anybody else's highlight reel. But Dovizioso is just picture perfect through every single corner, and I love him. Like in terms of racers, since Nicky was around and Colin Edwards around, I definitely think that my two favorites are Dovizioso and of course Jorge Lorenzo. When he's on his day, he's just amazing to watch as well. So I guess we can kind of go ahead and talk about Jorge Lorenzo. Of course, for those who haven't listened to some of these podcasts I've done, we live in Italy, and of course everybody knows that Jorge Lorenzo is public enemy number one, except for Marquez, I guess. Valentino Rossi and the majority of fans in Italy are all just Rossi nut huggers. So anytime you turn on TV or you watch the sports news and they're talking about MotoGP, it's pretty much just Jorge Lorenzo is finished. Jorge Lorenzo, he has no confidence. Jorge Lorenzo has no balls. Jorge Lorenzo this, Jorge Lorenzo that. But what do you think that we can expect from Jorge Lorenzo that he's on the Honda? And do you think towards the end of the season he'll be competing, not necessarily for a title, but definitely back among the top 3 or 4 in the championship?
Well, I think Jorge Lorenzo, of course, he had a big crash in training before the season, the preseason started. So he wasn't able to basically get on the bike at Sepang to start setting everything up. He started his preseason in Qatar. And that is a very hard situation when you're talking about a bike like the Honda, which, like the Ducati, is very difficult to ride. It's not something you can hop on. It's not like a Yamaha where pretty much anybody can hop on a Yamaha and ride it really fast. And it takes a lot of time. Jorge Lorenzo went into practice and he high-sided in Qatar, hurt himself really bad, but he raced anyway, and still managed to get something out of it. You can't take anything away from Lorenzo. Lorenzo's won titles. He knows how to ride. On his day, there is nobody better than Jorge Lorenzo in going around a racetrack. Him and Dovi, I think, have a lot in common in that sense. Whereas when they ride and they're riding well, it looks effortless. They're just absolutely perfect. Now, the first three races, as we've already said, aren't really much of a gauge. So, my opinion, he uses the first three races as testing. Uh, he's obviously he's still in for the title because there's only been one race. And there's plenty of people who have come back and won titles with, horrible beginning of the season, or crashing out of two races. Anything's possible. I don't think he's that is his target for this year. I think his target for this year, after hurting himself and after this high side, is more of a get fast on the bike as fast as he can, try to finish in the top 5, and try to win some races, especially after being on the Ducati and having a really horrible first season and doing, my opinion, the best he possibly could have done in the second season. I think he's going to get fast, and like with Marquez, you just can't bet against Jorge Lorenzo to find his way. He just has to get used to riding an inline 4 Honda rather than the Desmo Ducati.
Yeah, I think that might be like one of the biggest issues for him is that, unlike a guy like maybe Casey Stoner, whose style was, it was just basically just go balls to the wall no matter what the issues are. Jorge Lorenzo, if you look at the way he races, he kind of thrives on perfection. And as you mentioned, when everything is working for him, when he's on, there's nobody like him. You cannot touch him. But I think that once you saw with the Ducati last season, as you mentioned, his first season was awful, but his second season he was competing for a lot of races and he won 3 or 4 at least, I think. So
yeah.
he was very competitive on a bike that it is notoriously difficult to ride. So I think that you're definitely on the money there, where you say once he gets used to the Honda, which is obviously also a very difficult bike to ride, I think he'll definitely be towards the top, and probably for next season hoping to win a title, or at least be among the top 3 alongside probably Dovizioso and Marquez towards the end of the season, and maybe steal it, because he is a phenomenal rider. I think all this hatred that he gets, and I don't know if it's just in Italy, but it seems like he's one of those guys that a lot of people hates, and it's just kind of funny because when you saw Valentino Rossi on the Ducati struggling as much as he did, nobody really said Rossi was finished. It was all the bike's fault. But when Lorenzo is having those issues, the same exact issues with the same exact bike, it's all Lorenzo. He's trash. He's useless, and all that stuff. So I think that it's just it's got to be kind of rough for Jorge Lorenzo to have all this negativity towards him. But I think that if there's anybody that can kind of turn it around, it's probably going to be him.
Yeah, I think Italians are the only ones that have an issue with Lorenzo or Marquez, and like you said, Rossi followers tend to be just like that. They're followers. They think he's God on the motorcycle, and a lot of talent will go down as one of the greatest ever. Unfortunately for him, Marquez is just going to blast him out of contention of being the GOAT. But he's okay. I mean, he's been great for MotoGP. If it wasn't for Valentino Rossi, I don't even know that there would be a MotoGP. Because his star power pulled a lot of people in to watch, and a lot of people to pay for the MotoGP.com access and all this stuff. So, Valentino's Valentino. He's 40 years old and still racing on a factory Yamaha, at the highest level. He's a fast rider. Honestly, I think that a lot of these other guys are going to start passing him up, and if he finishes in the top 5 in points, I will be very impressed. it's kind of hard to bet against Valentino. But if you look at this lineup, I mean, it's gonna be. This is probably the hardest season he will have ever faced. I mean, when he was in his top, he really had nobody to race against. Nobody. I mean, once he had Biaggi, once he had Gibernau, but the reality is he didn't have a bunch of guys racing to win. You know, he was racing against one guy only the entire season, and a lot of times he had the perfect tire, the perfect everything. So he had a lot of advantage. And if he can finish top 5 now at 40 years old, I mean, that's just a massive feat. That's huge.
Yeah, Gibernau and Biaggi, a lot of their careers as well in MotoGP, they weren't even on factory bikes. So, I mean, he had some advantages. I think that when Gibernau was on the Movie Star Honda, which was, of course, the second tier. So, I mean, it is. He's had plenty of advantages in his career, and I think that's not really a secret. And but still, credit where credit is due. He was, Yamaha had an atrocious weekend in Qatar, and he still managed to finish. I think it was like 5th or something like that. I have the standings right here. I know.
Yeah, he did really well.
Finished 5th. Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And he was only 0.6 away from top, so he was pretty close.
Yeah, no, I mean he definitely did. But again, for me, you look at Qatar, and I don't really see it being any kind of a sign of things to come. Okay, he was there, but if Quartararo had actually started, he was lapping over a second a lap faster than Dovi at the front. Over a second, and that was in the first 25% of the race. Can you imagine what he would have done if he'd have been up there starting at I think he was starting in 5th or something. All things considered, if he'd have been doing that, he might have been able to win that race on his debut on the Yamaha. So my opinion, you just can't really look at Qatar with anything to give you any kind of real idea of what things are going to be like. But if you do go by that, then Valentino's he's gonna have a real fight with all these people.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one for him. I mean, at his age, and of course the fact that, like you said, this is by far the most stacked MotoGP championship we've seen probably ever. I mean,
probably, yeah, I think so.
Like back in the day, like you mentioned, Gibernau, Biaggi, great riders, but they probably wouldn't even scratch the top. I mean, of course, they would definitely be really, really solid, but would they be battling with Marquez? Would they be battling with Lorenzo? Would they be battling with Valentino?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I would have to say probably not. So,
well, I mean, yeah, that's difficult to say, because we're talking about guys now that, I mean, Max Biaggi didn't start riding motorcycles until he was 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So he was already behind the curve on that one. But I think that the riders now have a lot more training. They've come up in a more perfect atmosphere to be the riders they are. Back when Gibernau and Biaggi, when those guys, they were racing on the 500s a lot of times.
And Capirossi, let's go ahead and throw him in there. He's good.
Right, and Capirossi, yeah. These are 3 guys that, if it hadn't been for Valentino Rossi, the 3 of them would have had world titles. And I think that because those guys came up on 2-strokes and came up on the 500 bikes, where it was all about your wrist, and you would hurt yourself badly if you got even the smallest, input wrong on your bike. You would see high sides all weekend. It was horrible. So I think if those guys were on the bikes now, which I don't want to say it takes less skill to ride a MotoGP bike now compared to a 500 GP, But you put you put some of these guys on a 500 GP bike where if you turn the throttle wide open, guess what? It's wide open. You don't have a computer saying the GPS signal is telling us that we can't give you full throttle. These guys are going to end up on their head, and they're not going to finish, and they're going to be injured all the time. And I think it's a big difference. You just don't have. There isn't that thought in the back of your head constantly. If I make one mistake, I'm going to the hospital. And it's a whole different thing. And so to me it's difficult to say those guys wouldn't be up there with Lorenzo, simply because it was a whole different thing. I think if you looked at the reverse, if you took, say, the Jorge Lorenzo of now or the Marquez now, put them on 500 GP bikes against, say, a Biaggi or a Gibernal at the top, or Capirossi for that matter, I don't know how they would do. I think that probably the talent and the skill of Capirossi, Biaggi, and Gibernal would probably come over them, would be a bit bigger, a bit stronger, simply because the Lorenzo and the Marquez would be missing that, let's say, balls to be able to go for it. Mm-hmm. Of course, everything's relative. Who knows? At this point, we're just talking shit.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty much impossible because, of course, then you have to put Lorenzo and Marquez in the scenario where they also grew in the same.
Right.
They learned how to ride on two strokes and all that stuff. So it's just it's kind of it's pretty much like in every other sport. It's pretty much impossible to gauge people from different eras how they would do against each other. But I think it's definitely fair to say that this is by far the most stacked MotoGP ever. So if we're gonna see Rossi kind of take a step backwards, it's probably gonna be this season. So
I really expect him to do that, and I know he just signed another contract for 2 more years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it should be interesting. I think he made a mistake, but I'm willing to bet MotoGP Dorna is willing to do anything to keep him racing, because they don't really have anybody at the moment to take his place as being, the world's favorite.
Yeah, because Marquez, he kind of has, of course, because of the whole issue from a few years ago where, they rammed into each other and stuff like that. So Marquez kind of, because Rossi's so beloved, he kind of got that bad guy figure. And in racing, I don't think that bad guys generally are favored. I mean, so we'll see what happens there. But I mean, even on the Italian broadcast, Guido Meda, who is the guy who's been doing Italian MotoGP and stuff like that for decades at this point, they were talking about the same thing. Like, it's probably going to be a pretty big disaster for racing in Italy when Rossi retires, because there's really nobody that pays attention to Moto2, Moto3, so it's not like it's a huge following for MotoGP in Italy. It's a huge following for Rossi, and Italy is a huge market for them. Of course, they have 2 races here, and that's probably one of the main reasons, as you mentioned, for him sticking around so long, is that Dorna is probably throwing in so much money, so much, bonuses, stuff like that, try to get him to stick around and race for as long as possible. And of course, he's still consistently at, like I said, give credit where credit's due, around the top 5, top 6. So it's not like he's, shit. He's still one of the best in the world. So I just think that, he's probably not too mad about taking those millions of bucks to stick around and do his passion at the highest level. So I think he'll stick around and he'll probably be there. And I don't even know if he's too worried at this point about winning titles. I mean, of course, I'm sure that the competitive drive in him, having been a world champion so many times and being arguably, one of the top 3 or 4 greatest of all time in the sport, of course he wants to win titles. Of course he wants to win races. But does he expect to win races or titles? I think that's probably the difference right now. With Marquez there, I don't think I think he's probably kind of accepted that he's not quite on that level anymore.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's, in order to be the guy and win all those titles and to, at his age, still be competing, I don't know that he believes he can't
Mm-hmm.
compete. Um, Obviously he can because he's still somewhere up there. Um, I think he probably believes that all he needs is for the Yamaha to be a bit better, and then he can win, his 10th title.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't do that, then I don't know that he would sign another 2 years because Rossi's not really the guy who, okay, as long as I can finish top three, then I'll accept that, the millions of euro. Because at this point, he doesn't need millions of euro. He probably makes more money off of his own merchandising than he does off of what he's getting paid by Yamaha. And he will always have his sponsors. I mean, Dainese is always gonna support him. AGV is always going to. He will be 100 years old and he will still be hawking helmets for them. So he's always going to make all this money. So I don't know that that's it. I think as far as he's concerned, he can still do it. We can throw our opinion and say whether we think he can or not, but the reality is, he really think. Which I don't blame him. I wouldn't either. He's the 9-time world champion, and yeah, I haven't even seen a world trophy. So who the hell am I to say
Yeah.
to say whether he can or not? I can look at it and give it my best, my best reasoning, but I think Valentino does have the talent to kind of. I mean, you can look at him now. He can start dead last on the grid, even at 40, and he will finish in the top 5. He's fast, and he knows how to pass people. He knows how to get there, and then most of the tracks that MotoGP does, he's been on basically his entire career. So he knows every little millimeter of these tracks. So I think that plays a big part.
Yeah, and of course you aren't a 9-time world champion without having an insanely strong mind. So I'm pretty sure he
Right,
definitely has the
exactly.
confidence to do pretty much anything in his career. Of course, like you said, can he still do it? Probably not. But
Yeah.
he's definitely going to believe that he probably can.
Right, because if he didn't, then he wouldn't sign another contract.
Yeah.
I just don't see him. I mean, he would ruin his legacy by, doing 2 years where he finishes top 10. He would ruin it. He would ruin everything he built all those years. So I don't know. I think Rossi. I have my own opinion on how he managed to get his titles, but one thing I will never take away from him, and that's that he is a great rider. Great. His riding ability is nobody is better than him. Let's say in his career, I see nobody now who is better than him when he was at the top of his game.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying that he's better than everybody else, but nobody was better than him. He knew what to do. Of course, he had the perfect tires brought in from Michelin on Saturday. He had the bike that was the absolute best bike on the grid most of the time that he won his titles. And again, like we said before, he had no competition in comparison to, say, the last 5 years, 6 years, where, if I'm not mistaken, he hasn't won a world title. So I have my own opinions on that stuff, but opinions are like assholes.
We all got one.
Yeah, but mine smells like roses.
I wish I could say that about mine.
Well, you can say that about yours.
Yeah,
It doesn't
I
necessarily
guess.
make it true.
That's true. All that butt hair.
It's not
gets
like
in the way.
there's. Pretty sure nobody's going to be running around trying to sniff your ass to prove you wrong.
Except for Ulo, which is the cat, but that's
Well,
his
your cat.
He's a psycho.
Cat.
But that's a story for a different day.
That's a story for every day, my friend.
All right. Well, I guess we can you kind of already gave your predictions for Argentina, but I guess apart from who winning the race, who do you think's gonna finish? Let's say top 5.
Okay, well, I think it's going to be first. I think it's going to be Dovey, and then second, I think it's going to be Marquez. Of course, like I said, Marquez could just crash himself out. He has done that before. I think third, my opinion, I think it's going to be one of the Suzukis, either Rins or Mir. Mir is, I don't know if there's something about that guy. I think that he's really gonna. He'll probably outdo Rins this year, I think, and I think they'll both be battling for a top five championship finish. Um, I think you're probably looking at. Um, I think you're maybe Quartararo finishing fourth, and Rossi fifth, and Vinales. I think he'll maybe seventh or sixth. And then everybody else can kind of fall in where they are. To me, anything after fifth doesn't make a difference. Does it? It just doesn't really do anything for you.
Yeah.
So yeah. So my podium are those three, or some variation of Dovey and Marquez, and then a Suzuki in third. But I would love to see one of the Suzukis win the race. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, like honestly, like at this point in MotoGP, I mean, there's really only two things that I hope for. Number one is that Dovizioso, does as well as possible, and number two, that we finally get to see some underdogs getting more than like one win a season. Like it'd be awesome to see the Suzukis manage to sneak in two to four wins at least. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would at least add a little bit of, if I'm not gonna say like interest, because of course the season's already interesting as it is, but add a little bit more diversity to who actually gets the wins. And then you never know. Crutchlow, he's always capable of at times hitting these great performances and winning a race here and there. But so I mean, there's plenty of people in there that can win a race and steal it and have great performances, especially in the rain. There's plenty of guys who can do that as well. So I think it's gonna be an interesting one, just because, like we said, it's kind of all, anything can happen in these first three races. It's kind of hard to gauge who's really gonna win, and it's gonna be at least an interesting one. So I'm definitely looking forward to the season getting back into full swing.
Okay, well, who do you think is going to be on the podium?
Well, I would definitely. It's always going to be between Marquez and Dovizioso. Just for my preference, I'll go with Dovizioso winning. Second, I'll go with Marquez. Third, I'm actually going to go with. I was going to say Rins. Just because I thought that he looked really, really, really good in Qatar. So I'll go ahead and go with Rins, just because I think that he's I don't know. I think he's a bit more there because it's the second season of MotoGP, so I think that Mir might take a little bit longer to get there. But he's definitely looking like a very, very talented guy. At fourth, I think
this is his third season on the Suzuki.
On the Suzuki, third season? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I think he was teammate with Ionone's last season.
That's right. I think you're right.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So third, Rins. I think I'm gonna go with fourth. I might go with Rossi because his. When it comes to race day, like whatever happens in practice, whatever happens in qualifying, he kind of always just finds a way to get towards the top. So I think that this might be another one of those where he's able to do that. And then for fifth, maybe go with Mir. Or who knows, maybe if Lorenzo is somewhat fit, maybe he can get himself in there.
Maybe, yeah.
So I mean, yeah, it's with him, it's just kind of depending on how his body's doing and how he adjusts to the bike. So that might take him a bit longer, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him in there.
Yeah, I think he definitely has the ability. I think this weekend, today, he's still, I don't even think he's top 15 in practice. But again, he's having to figure out the bike, and I don't know how he is physically. If I'm not mistaken, he busted a couple of ribs when he was in Qatar at that high side. Maybe he's okay now, but anyway, I think he's going to need a few races to get himself up towards, let's say, consistently top 12, top 13. And again, like we said, the field is extremely strong.
Yeah.
So, nobody's guaranteed to be at the top all the time. Not even Marquez. All it takes is a couple of mistakes with his bike, and that's how he lost the title to Lorenzo, is because his bike was just shit, and he did the best he could, but he crashed a lot. That was when he crashed on the. He crashed in Argentina. He crashed in, of course, not the Circuit of Americas, because he's the god of COTA. So, yeah, I think that nobody's guaranteed anything anymore.
No, definitely not. And I do want to kind of throw one guy in for fifth. I think Petrucci
Yeah.
might do it. He might be able to get top five because he's not.
Think
He's not.
so?
I don't know. Like Ducati, they do well on these kind of tracks. So I think that, and he's not bad. Like I don't think he's definitely not top tier. He's not Joe Roberts levels, like I would put it. But he's not tier 1. He's definitely like tier 7. But he's still one of those guys that he can do pretty well on his day. So I think that maybe he might be able to get top 5.
Well, I think the problem with Petrucci is that he's a good rider. He's really good, really strong. But it seems like he feels the pressure. And now he's on the factory Ducati, and this is what he's been fighting for quite a while, and he's got it, and if he doesn't deliver, then he's gone. And I don't know that they're going to send him back to Pramac, or if Pramac would even accept him, because at this point, he's an older rider, and, the Ducati and all that, for their teams like Pramac and things, they're going to want to bring in rookies and young guys who they can eventually put them on the factory bikes. So I think Petrucci, he could do it. Like you said, I mean, he's capable. I just personally don't know that he's proven that he's mentally strong enough to get it done. It's hard.
Oh, I mean, it's definitely difficult. I mean, you consider, like you said, he's dealing with basically nothing but world champions, and he's not really one of those like that at this point in time. So I don't think that he's I think he can definitely get around. I think he finished 6th in Qatar, and I think that's realistically like more or less where he can achieve, on a good day and stuff like that. So I think that it's a possibility. And one of these tracks, I think that he might be able to do it. And as you mentioned, it's a make or break season for him, really. So that type of issue might come in early, and we'll see. I think that as time goes on, as maybe results aren't quite what you would expect from a Ducati factory rider, then that'll probably have a bigger effect on him. But as of right now, I don't know. I think that he might be able to get top 5 in these early races, and then kind of from there move backwards a little bit.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I think he's definitely, I mean, with the bike and with his experience with the Ducati, I think he definitely can always be towards 5th, around 5th, let's say. But I think these early races he might be a bit more conservative, simply because he's on the factory bike. His teammate is leading the championship at this point, and has been the past 2 seasons he's been battling for the title all the way up to the end. So he has a bit of pressure, and I think he might have it in his mind it's better to finish 6th or 7th in these first races before he gets to Europe, and then actually really try in Europe. That way it looks good, and he feels good, and the team is supporting him. But at the same time, Petrucci's not really a guy who just throws caution to the wind and says, hell with it, I'm going for it. He's just not that guy, And he's probably following Dovizioso's lead. Be smart, know what you've got, control what you've got, and do your best to finish the highest you possibly can. Don't try to put yourself in a position where you end up in a ditch,
Yeah, he's definitely
The
more
complete
of a support
opposite
rider.
of
Good.
Marquez.
Yeah, that by far, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marquez is win it or bin it, whereas Petrucci, he was a test rider for Ducati for the longest time. So I mean,
Yeah.
like he's not. I think that the biggest reason that they probably promoted him to be the guy alongside Dovizioso was simply to do as much solid work as possible in terms of testing and improving the bike to where Dovizioso, who's a far more talented rider, a far more intelligent rider, I would say a lot more. He has a lot more. Championship mentality, I guess you could say. I think that he's definitely going to be kind of supporting Dovizioso in a lot of these scenarios.
Well, I agree with you. I think also there's probably kind of a reward because he's been very dedicated to Ducati for years. He's put in a lot of great rides on the Pramac, and he's contributed to the bike that Dovi is, fighting for the title with. So, my opinion, Lorenzo left. They were like, okay, we're going to give him the opportunity. He deserves it. He's fought for it. Let's see what he can do. And in the end, he is a good second rider. He's not like Iannone, who, as a second rider, he gets pissed off and takes people out and does dumb shit, which is what Iannone is going to do his entire career. He's going to do dumb shit. He's going to take people out. I think he is a good, like you say, he's a great second rider. I don't think he's never going to battle for a title, but just being there and finishing, let's say, the top 10 is a big deal. Especially in this field.
Oh, for sure. Just to talk about Iannone for a second, I think that, like you said, it's better to have a guy like Petrucci who's going to be your second rider because realistically, unless you're looking at a team like Honda who have two guys who are Lorenzo and Marquez, two guys that are like realistically those are the two guys that have the best chances of winning titles in the long run. Of course, Dovizioso as well, but you look at those two; they're the two, except for Rossi, who have won by far the most titles, and they're arguably the best riders in the paddock in the grid. It's always like if you're gonna have somebody alongside one of them who isn't gonna be a potential champion, it's always better to have a guy who's not gonna cost you hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. So I think that Petrucci kind of fits the bill. Like Iannone is pretty much guaranteed 2 to 3 crashes a weekend, which is a lot of money in MotoGP. We're not talking about racing at a go-kart track down the street. We're talking a lot of money. So
I feel sorry for Aprilia.
Yeah, especially because they're not even like one of the top teams, so it's not like they're making a huge amount of prize money and stuff like that. So
yeah,
they're in trouble.
Yeah, with Iannone they definitely are, and and the sad part is Iannone could be a good solid rider, and he on that Suzuki in the beginning he actually did he had a lot of good races, but then he would just do something idiotic, and he would slam people to the ground. He would put himself to the ground. It's sad to see, that talent go to waste, but, he'll eventually find himself back in the Italian Championship, racing a superbike or something, trying to finish, third or something, and he'll finish his career there. But I think he's still dating Belen, so there's always that.
I've heard rumors that they aren't together, but that's probably like the biggest loss of his career, I guess you could say. Because like if he wasn't racing in MotoGP, I don't think there's a chance in hell that he would be hitting that. But
definitely not. Belen is damn.
Yeah, she's a very talented lady. I'll give her that.
Yeah,
she has a lot of talents.
Yeah, she's just very, very, very hot. I'm just gonna say that. I'm not gonna say talent.
Well,
wow, beautiful, beautiful woman.
That's uncalled.
Anyway, yeah, that's so
wrong.
It's pretty sad when the biggest thing you can say about Iannone is his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, whatever.
Yeah. Yep, he's very talented, but I think he might actually be like a less talented or less skillful version of Simoncelli.
Yeah, Simoncelli. If he was still here, I think he would be. He would definitely be battling for titles right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
well,
like to see Michelli. I mean, he made a lot of stupid decisions, but he undoubtedly had a lot of talent.
for
A
sure,
lot of talent.
for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, so I guess like the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is, of course, the only American in the MotoGP circuit. Moto
Yeah.
3, Moto 2, and MotoGP is Jingling Joe Roberts, as we call him, because that huge schlong he must have.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anything about that, but that could be what's affecting him on the racetrack.
Maybe, yeah,
And
but
it must be really hard to change sides and all of his weight restrictions when he's got a 10-pound dong.
he's like a tier 20 racer, but he's a tier 1. He's a tier
Yeah,
1
he's
swag god with a huge
tier
ass
one
dick.
schlong. Yeah. Yeah.
He's everything
Yeah,
Giannone wishes he was.
Yes, I could see it now. Complaining about somebody's schlong.
Yeah, he looks like one of those guys who probably would. But,
Yeah, could be. Well, Joe Roberts, yeah, I mean, he has a lot of potential. Last season was his first season in the MotoGP paddock period, and he did. I personally think he did really well. I said if he managed to finish in the top 20, that was a huge achievement, which he did. And because he was riding a bike, there was only 2 of those bikes in the paddock. So that means that there are only 2 guys doing any kind of giving data, which is difficult for a supplier, especially a chassis supplier, to really upgrade. I think that he did the best he could, and I don't really know if he beat his teammate overall in the season, but I know he did really well. This year he's on the All-American team, American KTM, I think is what they call it, and basically took over another team, bought a team that was already in the Moto2 paddock and just changed the name, but everybody else is the same. He's a rider in that, and he's trying to figure out the KTM. This year is the first year where they have the Triumph engines, so they have a lot of work to do with the electronics, which of course everybody has the same electronics, but you have to work out your own electronics setup. So his teammate is doing better than him, but his teammate was in this team last year and did very well. So, my opinion, he has everything he needs to do well in Moto2 this year. Let's say top 15, which Moto2 is extremely competitive and has a lot of bikes. So, top 15 is a pretty big deal, my opinion. It just remains to be seen if he can overcome all the Spanish and the Italian riders that have flooded that championship. I think he can do it. He has good backgrounds on the 600, so yeah, let's see what he can do.
I mean, hopefully he'll be able to do a bit better than he did last year. Of course, like you said, he was on a pretty difficult bike, considering there was really no other people to give any help, and you never know.
Right.
He might be able to do some stuff this year, and I give him a lot of shit because, of course, Gianluca, which is my brother, and he's a huge. I don't know if he's an actual Joe Roberts fan, but he always brags about him. So, like, that's where the whole tier 1 thing is. He says that Joe Roberts isn't necessarily like a tier 1 rider, but his swag and his style, it absolutely makes him tier 1. Like, he's the most marketable guy in MotoGP apparently. So
It's hilarious.
It is what it is. So of course I kind of have to root against him for this blasphemous type of talk that comes from his mouth. But at the same time, he's still a young American rider. So I think that it's good to hope that at least one of them can break through and do something that we haven't really seen from any of them since Nicky Hayden or Ben Spies.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, Nicky Hayden won that title, but he didn't do it from starting at the lower levels, and it's much more difficult.
So much competition.
Yeah, there's so much competition. It's so hard to go up from the lower levels. I mean, you look at Alex Marquez. Alex Marquez is still in Moto2, um, and he hasn't won a title in Moto2 yet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't think he has. No.
But I know he's fast. But the competition is hard, and Marc Marquez says his brother's faster than him. So I've yet to see that. So it's difficult, and especially if you haven't been traveling with the circus, year after year after year. He raced AMA, in Moto America. He did that, and then the Spanish Championship in Moto2, and I think he finished fourth overall. So that's a pretty big deal, and there's some serious competition in there as well. He can do it. I'd love to see him move up. Obviously, because he's an American, I'd love to see an American doing well, but I like to see young guys move up and do well and prove what they can do, because it's only better for all of us.
Yeah, we can definitely hope, and whether he achieves it or not, then I think at the end of the day, he's gonna give it his best, and we'll see what he can do. It's definitely not easy, especially because he's the American among a lot of people that have grown up on these circuits their entire life,
Right.
and it's not going to be easy for him. Like we saw Ben Spies, he came over from America to World Superbike and he dominated, but that was just an insane feat. Most people don't do that. Most people don't dominate when they come over. It takes them a year, 2, 3 years really to become a top tier rider. So we'll see. Maybe along down the line he can do a bit better and get himself towards the top 10, top 15 on Moto 2, and I think, like you said, that'll be a pretty solid feat for him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's pretty much all that I had listed down that I wanted to cover.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you have any closing thoughts you want to put out there about the season.
About the season. Well, I just saw that the top 21 riders in second practice in Argentina are all within 1 second of each other, and
Okay,
that's pretty big. And Ducati, by the way, Dovi is at the front, leading FP2. But of course, all that may change tomorrow. I don't know how clean the track is now after a day's practice. But tomorrow should be interesting with qualifying, because with the Ricardo de Tormo, if I'm not mistaken, they really how you qualify is extremely important in this race. Extremely important, because you can easily get taken out at that track.
Yeah, it's not looking like the most stable track around the circuit. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure not. Definitely not.
But overall, I think that it's going to be an interesting race for sure, and hopefully, the season will be as good as Qatar was, and throughout we'll hopefully see a lot of competition.
Yeah. If not, then maybe there'll be a schlong competition between Joe Roberts and Iannone.
Hey, you never know. Like the spicy Italian sausage might be able to beat out the classic California, whatever the hell. I don't know.
I don't know what the hell. I don't know.
It is what it is. The Surfer Dick versus prime Italian douchebag Dick. We'll see which one pulls it out.
Which one? Yeah.
Pause.
Yeah, all right.
All right, well, I guess that's kind of a great way to end it with some bullshit. So
yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, so thank you so much to for everybody who listened to this. We're going to be doing these definitely before every race, and because, of course, it's going to be like a week or two here and there where there is no racing, I'm sure we'll have something pretty much every week. We're going to be talking about some racing. We might even talk about World Superbike and stuff like that, so definitely stay tuned for all that stuff, and check out my Motogp podcast, my general sports podcast, which is, of course, this is like a special, I guess you could say. Like it's going to be the same name, but it's going to be only about MotoGP. Whereas most of the time I talk about UFC, soccer, racing, whatever comes to my mind. Some gaming as well. So definitely check those out if you're interested. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right. You guys thanks for listening.